3 days to scrap the scheme.
So, Fáilte Gachtainna, this Murga you're very, very welcome. We're delighted to have you here with us this evening. I am here with Eoin O'Brien, TD, our Sinn Féin spokesperson on housing, as you know, and also with Pearse Doherty, TD, who is our finance spokesperson. And as you know, we've prioritised the issue of housing, or actually you, the people, have prioritised the issue of housing. In the course of the last election, it was clear that it was a core issue. After the election, everybody right across politics said, yes, that they had heard the message for change and that they understood that the housing policies of the past were failing so many people, that we needed a different approach and really fundamental change. And Sinn Féin set out the plan for that change. And the plan is based on public housing, the correct use of public land, and it's based on affordability. Homes that average families and workers and young people can afford to buy, rents that you can afford to pay. All of it is hardwired into the plans that we know that need to be delivered. So unfortunately, a year has gone on. We have the government that we have. You'll all have your own views on that, but their approach to housing has been absolutely disastrous. I think it's fair to say, and we're very concerned at this point that many of the mistakes of the past are being made again by this whole government, but in particular by the Fianna Fáil Minister Darragh O'Brien. So, Eoin, I want to come to you first, if I can, as our housing spokesperson and as the person who has led the way with setting out the kind of housing plans that we need. Just to explain to everyone who's here with us the motion that we're bringing forward on Wednesday and why it's so important, Eoin, that we get as much support as possible for this motion.
Sure, Mary Lou, and great to be here. So look, just after the general election last year, two leading lobby organisations for the property industry, Property Industry Ireland, which is IBEX lobby group on property, and another group representing some of the largest investors and builders, Irish institutional property, interestingly led by a former General Secretary of Fianna Fáil and a former banking figure, Pat Farrell, came to all of the housing spokespeople in all of the parties, trying to sell what they call a shared equity loan scheme. This is essentially a secondary loan that government would offer people looking to buy a house or an apartment. And the idea is it helps bridge the gap between the loan that you can raise from your bank and the inflated price of the house in the market. These are very, very controversial schemes because they don't actually make houses more affordable. They don't bring the cost of owning your own home down. All they do is line the pockets of developers, and in fact, in many places, they push up prices. So we told the lobbyists we weren't interested, but Fianna Fáil clearly had a different view. And what's now happened is Darragh O'Brien has included this very, very controversial developer scheme in his affordable housing bill. There's other parts of that bill which aren't so problematic, but he's trying to push ahead with this very, very reckless policy. And it is our view, but it's also the view of a growing number of people, that this scheme will push up house prices, particularly in high demand areas like Dublin and the other cities. And it'll also saddle working people with very, very significant levels of debt, with all of the risks that come with that. And all the while, of course, the developers and the investors are laughing all the way to the bank because they get the inflated prices for the homes. That's the view not just of Sinn Féin, but of people such as, for example, Robert Watt, the former Secretary General of the Department of Public Expenditure Reform. FOIs that I got from that department confirmed that he said the only reason developers want this scheme is it'll push up house prices. The Economic Social Research Institute, a kind of a mainstream orthodox government-funded economic think tank, they've raised serious concerns about how this would push up house prices. We know the central bank are concerned, and today we've heard that one of the largest organisations representing auctioneers and valuers, the Irish Property Valuers Association, they've come out against the scheme. The reason why is very simple. This is based on a scheme that has been in operation in England and Wales for a decade. That scheme has pushed up house prices by about 6% in high demand areas like London, a little bit lower elsewhere, but still significantly. And it has saddled working people with an awful lot of debt. So our motion that will be debated in the Dáil on Wednesday is very simple. we want this developer scheme scrapped, and the 75 million euros that government has earmarked for the scheme this year should be invested in the direct delivery of affordable homes by local authorities, approved housing bodies, at prices that working people can genuinely afford. And interestingly, even some Fine Gaelers have called for the same thing. 9 Fine Gael councillors on Dublin City Council, including one who is a parliamentary assistant to the Minister for Finance, Paschal Donoghue, has called for this scheme to be scrapped. So there is no reason why we shouldn't pass our motion on Wednesday, and that will heap huge pressure on government to scrap this reckless, dangerous pro-developer scheme.
Thanks, Owen. So, I mean, you really, in some ways, Pearse, you couldn't make this up. Like, it's a developer scheme to keep prices high at a time where we need prices to come down. The developers will clearly gain from that. And so ordinary people then will have not one loan, but 2 loans, your mortgage and then a loan effective to the state. And Kieran has been on, he was at your seminar, Owen. He thought it was excellent. David McWilliams spoke at that. And he's really fearful that the approach of government now is going to lead another generation being locked out, being unable to afford a home. So he's asking Pearse, what are we going to do? What's he, Kieran, and all of the Kierans out there, what are we asking them to do?
Yeah, well, look, Kieran is spot on. The fears are genuine. This is, as Owen pointed out, this is a Fianna Fáil developer scheme. It's designed by the developers for one purpose, and that's to push up house prices. And it probably just speaks to or screams to how bad or how broken our housing system is, that prices are so high as we speak, that there's a whole generations that are locked out of home ownership. So they've concocted this type of scheme, developers to try and continue to charge those exorbitant prices, and indeed to push prices up further and find a way that people will still buy their wares, saddling generations with more debt. So we need to, as Owen pointed out, it's not just Sinn Féin that's calling this out. We've seen bad policy in the past from Fianna Fáil. We've gone back to the Galway tent, where the developers designed Fianna Fáil housing policy at that time. But in this time, there is a consensus outside of government that this is bad, that this will push up house prices, and there's experience from across the water that that's exactly what it'll do. So it'll push up house prices. It will also push up the share price of the developers, their business as well, and that's what happened in Britain. So what we want to do is we want to bring this to a head. We're bringing a motion to the Dáil, and that is to scrap this Fianna Fáil developer-led scheme, to replace it with proper in terms of housing that is affordable, that people can purchase, to make sure that we don't have a whole generation locked out of home ownership. And what we're asking people to do is to get behind that, to get behind the campaign to scrap this Fianna Fáil-led developer scheme, but also to get behind the alternative, which has been led by Owen, in relation to how we can deliver tens of thousands of social, affordable and cost rental houses that people can really afford, can genuinely afford, and that is schemes that are at the interest, have the interest of ordinary people and communities at their heart. So pick up the phone, send an email, let's get lobbying. As Owen said, it's, even within Fine Gael, you're starting to see the pressure being put on them because the evidence is there. This is just crazy stuff. Developers came to us, as Owen said. They tried to sell us this idea. We told them to sling their hook, but they went to government buildings and they've got a listening ear in the form of Darragh O'Brien, and he's been taken, for a mug in this. And that's the reality of it. We have the central bank, we have the ESRI, we have the Department of Public Expenditure, we have the entire opposition, we have the evaluation, we have the international experience, and everybody is screaming at the minister saying this scheme is bad, it will push up house prices, and it will saddle future generations with huge amounts of debt.
So whatever about Darragh O'Brien being taken for a mug, I mean, there's no way that ordinary people should be taken again. And I think people have learned from the experience and the real consequences of bad policy. And my God, we can't sleepwalk into that again. So Kieran, in answer to your question, as Pearse said, we want people to be active and we want people to be vocal on this issue. If this government think they'll get away with just passing this developer scheme as part of their legislation, well, then that's what they're going to do. Lots of you have sent in questions, and thank you just put two to yourself. Owen and Ish, if I can. Jodie's been in touch. She's a young person working full time. She's living with her mum in her mum's house. Can't afford to rent. Can't afford to save a down payment for at least 5 years. She's saying, "My God, all of this needs to change." We agree with you on that, Jodie. Michelle has been on. And myself and the husband renting for the last 10 years. They're not getting HAP or any other supports from government. And they're minimum wage earners. They're 2 kids. Their rent is so high they can't save for a deposit, and getting a mortgage is impossible. So there's 2 scenarios for Jodie and Michelle, where people are caught like in this circle, this frustrating situation where they're either living at home or renting, and you know, with their own families established, and they're just locked out, Owen. They're locked out of affordability.
Sure, and what people like your question need to know is there are alternatives. So, for example, there is no reason why Dublin City Council, South Dublin County Council, or a range of not-for-profit approved housing bodies or community housing trusts couldn't be building very large volumes of homes for working people to rent or buy at prices that they can afford. So, for example, if you take the Oscar Traynor Road site in Dublin Bay North, that site can deliver over 800 homes. There was originally a plan in which over half of those homes would be sold at astronomical unaffordable prices, and even the affordable homes would be at prices way beyond the reach of most working people. Thankfully, a majority of councillors refused to transfer the land to the developer. And what they're saying very clearly is they want government to give Dublin City Council the funding to deliver those 800 homes as an emergency, but at prices working people can afford. Now, if our motion were to pass on Wednesday, and the 75 million euros that's earmarked for this reckless developer scheme is transferred to the fund for local authorities to deliver genuine affordable homes, that fills the funding gap that Dublin City Council currently have. And all of the homes, all 800 plus houses, duplexes and apartments in Oscar Traynor Road can be genuinely affordable. They'll be 30% social, and you can have the rest a mix of affordable rentals at really competitive prices that working people can afford, and purchase prices way, way, way below the market price. That could have happened in O'Devany Gardens in your own constituency, but unfortunately a majority of Dublin City Councils thought likewise. And on O'Devany Gardens, the so-called affordable homes will cost the purchaser on average 360,000 euros. That's how crazy the last government's affordable housing scheme was. And we've been arguing for quite some time that if government were to double capital investment into public housing on public land and start to roll out large-scale projects which would get widespread political support, then you could start to deliver homes that people need. Likewise in Cork, our colleague Thomas Gould has been engaging with the local authority there. There's a site, St Kevin's, an old HSE psychiatric hospital site. And again, that's to be developed for social and affordable housing, but there will be unaffordable open market price homes. And there's question marks over how genuinely affordable the affordable homes will be. So it's not rocket science. If you go to Ballymun or if you go to Lusk at the moment, O'Coola & Co Housing are developing good quality starter homes, 2 and 3 bedroom homes and apartments at prices below 250,000 euros. And in fact, if you were doing similar developments outside of Dublin, you could push the prices even lower to below 200, in some cases 170 or 190. So I suppose what we're saying is let's get away from this Celtic Tiger era developer-led scheme. Let's move the money across, but even more importantly, let's then increase the funding beyond what government is currently proposing. Because this year alone, so far, government is only guaranteeing 90 genuinely affordable homes and 390 affordable homes for families to rent, although the rent is still a bit too high, over €1,000. That's nowhere close to the scale of ambition that's required to meet the need that's out there. So it's not complicated. We have the land, we have the funding, we have the skilled staff, and we have a lot of construction workers whose future employment is at risk because of COVID impacting on reductions in the level of need for, say, commercial or high-end private. Let's get all those men and women working in good quality public home housing schemes to deliver the thousands of homes annually that working families need to rent and buy.
Thanks, Donna. I think that's a really important message, isn't it? That this can be solved. I mean, the housing crisis is a crisis, but it's a consequence of just bad decisions and bad policy. We can turn this around. You know, we have the land, as Owen has said. What we need is the plan. What we need is the political will, and what we need is people in leadership with the cop on to actually understand that affordable housing actually has to be affordable. It has to be affordable to people on average incomes and people on lower incomes too. And just a question here, Piers, you might talk on this one. Alan, thank you for your question, Alan. Alan says they got the mortgage break, himself and his wife, at the start of the pandemic, and it helped. He's asking Piers the question that we have asked, that you have asked: why wasn't this available for this lockdown or the one before? And what can be done to help people like Alan and his family who are really struggling now to pay the mortgage?
Yeah, well, thanks, Alan, for sending in that question. And look, this is something that we have been really involved in. We've written to all of the banks. I've been engaged with a number of them directly in relation to providing these payment breaks, these mortgage breaks. And we've raised it with the government, we've raised it with the Taoiseach, with the Taoiseach, with the Minister for Finance, and indeed with the central bank. And it's absolutely infuriating that the banks will not allow at this point in time for these mortgage breaks. So what happened was that the European Central Bank, or the European Banking Authority, came out with rules to say we're in the middle of a pandemic, people are losing their jobs because of public health, therefore the banks need to play their part, and they introduced rules that banks would be able to give mortgage breaks. That happened here in this state for the first 6 months. But then it was when we came into the second phase in December, the European Banking Authority says, look, we need to do this again. But the Irish government and the banks decided, no, we're not doing this. And there's so many people that have been left behind. The banks talk about dealing with people on an individual basis. But first of all, we know that that's not happening to the satisfaction of a lot of people. There's particularly a big lobby in terms of those in the music industry, which are lobbying and meeting with banks and with the department, looking for these payment breaks to be reinstalled. And also, if you get an individual designed scheme, your credit is affected into the future. So this is something that's allowed. The European authorities recognised that this was needed. They allowed it to happen, but our banks are simply ignoring it. And what's frustrating is that you have banks in the north that are advertising that if you want a payment break, you have up to the end of March to apply for a further payment break for people. The right thing to do, which is to take the pressure off people. So can I say to Alan that in relation to this, we are going to continue to pursue, we're going to continue to push. We're going to have the central bank and the banks before our committee on finance shortly, and it's something that we're going to continue to try and push on behalf of yourself and your family, but also countless other people who need this break from banks that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that they were rescued by the Irish people. And now is the time for the banks to play their own part. So these payment breaks should be available as is allowed, and there shouldn't be additional interest being charged during the period that they are available.
And Piers, if you recall, when we were pressing them, and you in particular were meeting with the Senate and pressing government to actually do right by Irish mortgage holders, do you remember they met with the banks? And do you remember we had the farcical scene of Fine Gael government ministers meeting former Fine Gael government ministers who are now the spokespeople for the banking industry? Do you remember that? Do you remember those encounters?
Absolutely, and it's completely bizarre. You know, like we pushed the government on this quite hard. Rogers, one of his defences were, well, at these meetings they talk regulatory gobbledygook. Like, you know, seriously, like, you know, you're a minister, you have countless advisors and people within the department, and you can't use that type of excuse that the person who's sitting across the table from you is the former junior minister of Fine Gael, Brian Hayes, who's somehow bamboozling you regulatory gobbledygook. This is very simple. The banks in the north allow this to happen. The banks in England are allowing for these payment breaks. The European Banking Authority allow for it because it's a pandemic. People need breathing space. People need a bit of support And there's a lot of things that we can't control out there. There's a lot of pain that communities are going through, but this is one thing that we can. And we're very different from a lot of other jurisdictions because we own the majority shareholders in a number of these banks. And the idea that they're still not doing this, is ridiculous. And to me, it's about this closed club, between Fine Gael representing bankers on one hand and then going in to meet them on the other. We actually put in a freedom of information request in relation to the minutes of that meeting when he assured us that he would make sure that no bank would profit from this. The minutes show that they didn't ask that question. And that just explains that what happens in these meetings are a cosy conversation as opposed to what it is. We are the shareholder in these banks, do right by the Irish people who are suffering at this point in time. And this is allowed by the European authorities for that very reason, recognising that people are in the middle of a pandemic and need a little bit of support.
So, I mean, it'd be understandable if people kind of were to lose all hope. You have developers designing schemes that the Fianna Fáil minister takes on board, and we told them to sling their hook, but they're taking them on board and are intent and implement them. And then you have this cosy relationship between banking and Fine Gael and banking. It's not a pretty picture. I know, and we have, oh my God, countless people, Bridget's in touch, really, really afraid. I mean, there's real fear for the future, everything out of reach, afraid of her kids growing up, poor and insecure housing. Charlotte, age 29, with her fiance 35. They've two lovely boys, age 7 and 2. They're working. They were renting. Now they're in a mobile near their parents for the last number of years. But it just is. They sum up as, they just want a place for their kids to grow up as their family home, and they say it's an absolute disgrace. Philip, age 33. Hello, Philip. He says most people can't hope to afford a house on their own. Philip says he's on the autistic spectrum, and not having a place of his own has really, he says, put a massive strain on his mental health. So, Owen, there's just a snapshot of some of the stories, and of course we know all of this, don't we? Because we've been talking to people for so long and advocating for them, and yet we're here. I get a real sense of not just anger, but a little bit of despair out there, and I think that's dangerous. Even though it's under.
Well, look, let's be very clear. Change is possible when people get organised and when people get mobilised. And obviously, we'd encourage everybody to play their part, whether in Sinn Féin or whether in the multitude of housing rights organisations, housing rights campaigns, and the likes of Raise the Roof, led by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. But when we mobilise and organise in a united and coordinated way, we can deliver real change. And we've lots of recent examples from the water charges on where we've shown we can do that. There is going to be another general election soon, and this is going to be the change election. This will be the opportunity for us to really break with the cosy Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael consensus of the last century, and particularly of the last 30 years, and for Sinn Féin to lead a progressive pro-change government that starts to tackle the really, really big issues facing people's lives. And housing is just one of those. It's the one we're here to talk about this evening. And in the meantime, we need to keep every single ounce of pressure that we can on government when they're doing the wrong thing. So Pearse had it right. No matter where any of our viewers are tonight, if you're worried about the sound of this developer's scheme and the impact it'll have on pushing up prices and saddling more, get onto your computer, send emails to your local TDs, pick up the phone and ring their constituency clinics, because they're all getting paid to listen to voters in their constituency and say, stop pursuing pro-developer policies, stop pursuing policies that will push up house prices and saddle working people with debt, and invest the scale and level of money that's required to build and buy the homes that working people not only need, but absolutely deserve. Look, there was a period of time in the history of this state where we didn't have the scale of affordable housing crisis that we have today. There was a time when the state invested heavily, not just in large volumes of really good council housing, which we need far more of, but also assisting people with grants and loans to build and buy their own homes, our grandparents' generation in many cases. So we need to return to what worked in the past And that's very, very simple. We have the land, we can access the money, we have the building staff, we have the planners, we have the architects, we have the quantity surveyors and the engineers. Let's start to show real ambition. Let's start to show real determination. And I think once we get going, nobody will be able to stop us. So I hear the despair. I spoke to a woman today in my own constituency who has a bank loan, but every time she goes to bid for a house, her range is about 250,000. 30 or 40 grand is added onto the eventual sale price, and everything is just out of reach. What does she need? She needs South Dublin County Council to build good quality homes at prices of 230,000 or less, and then she can buy her own home. She doesn't need any dangerous, high risk secondary shared equity loan dreamt up by a developer, and she'll have a reasonable mortgage and the security for herself and her children into the future. So this can be done. And if anybody out there listening is nervous, is worried, is distraught, get involved, play your part, and help us, one, get this dodgy developer scheme scrapped from the Affordable Housing Bill, and two, come the next election, let's return the maximum number of Sinn Féin and other pro-change TDs, so that for the first time in the history of this state, we can have a government that puts people first and that tackles the housing crisis head on. More social housing for those in need, more affordable rental accommodation for those who want to rent while saving for deposit, more affordable purchase homes, and also crucially tackling the scourge of homelessness and the scandal of people sleeping in inadequate emergency accommodation on our streets. Those things can all be done. Let's get up and get doing them now.
And Owen, just on a related but slightly different matter, PJ has been in touch. Hello, PJ. Council houses lying idle, boarded up. He says bring them back into the system. Very frustrating to see perfectly good houses boarded up. And then Andrea, and this is one that arises a lot, as you know, Owen. She says, hi, Andrea, told my income is too high to be on the corporation list, on the council list, but she's not earning enough to get a move. That's not an untypical situation, Owen.
Sure. So first of all, for PJ's question, there should be very, very strict turnaround times for council properties when they are vacated. It should never take more than 10 to 12 weeks, depending on the work that's required. In my own local authority, for example, in South Dublin, the average time is 20 weeks. And I know of a number of local authorities where it takes much longer. So that's about government, first of all, being much tougher with the local authorities, but also if they need additional funding to refurbish those units to an adequate standard, to provide that refurb funding. No council home should be vacant for more than 10 to 12 weeks between tenancies. And Andrea's question, the two key issues are as follows. The social housing eligibility thresholds haven't been raised since 2011. And in many counties, particularly in rural counties, and Pearse will know this well, the thresholds are so low that in fact we even have some families that have a large number of children on social welfare who are pushed over the limit. So they urgently need to be revised, and then they need to be index linked to inflation. So as people's wages go up and people start to do a little bit better for themselves, they're not caught in that trap. And on the flip side, even when we do raise them, we're also going to need large volumes of what we call affordable cost rental accommodation. This is affordable rental accommodation for working people who aren't going to be eligible for social housing, but for example, who can't pay the high rents that we're seeing, not just in Dublin, but increasingly in Cork and Galway and Waterford and Limerick and elsewhere. And that would be rental accommodation that is rental for life if that suits the needs of the person or the family. And it takes account of what change in the future, so that while their rent would be affordable today, if, for example, they reach pension age and they go on to a smaller occupational pension, or, for example, the state contributory pension, the rent will fall accordingly. That's what happens in other civilized cities across Europe, and that's what should happen here. So raise the threshold for social housing, ensure that there's an adequate supply of affordable cost rental, but also have lots and lots of good quality homes that people can buy at prices between 170 and 230,000, depending on the unit size and the location. That can be done. And in fact, there's a large number of private developments out there at the moment where it's unlikely that even when the construction restrictions are lifted, they'll get back to building full tilt because of the changes in the mortgage market, uncertainties of lenders and uncertainties of investors. There's quite a lot of those developments. Some of them are on site now or could be on site shortly, where local authorities, approved housing bodies or community housing trusts could go in and acquire them at cost and then build them out, keep the construction workers in employment and deliver the homes that people need. We need 20,000 public homes to meet social and affordable need, constructed and renovated every single year. And let's not forget the 90,000 private vacant homes across the state. It's astonishing. I got a parliamentary question response back today. Government has only brought back over 1,000 of those 90,000 units since 2017. These are houses that are built. These are houses that just need to be refurbished, just need to be renovated in every town, in every village, and in every one of our city centres. So again, it's not because we don't have a plan. It's not because we don't have access to the skills and the cash. It's because we do not have the political ambition or will at government. And if this government isn't going to adopt the ambition that's required, let's replace them with people who have that plan and who have that ambition. And I have to say, there's no better party than our own to lead that change in housing policy, along with the other areas that, of course, we talk about so often.
Thanks, Sean. And Piers, Maura has been in touch. Hello, Maura. Maura is 68. And Maura says, I've been listening to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael spout the same old mantra all my life. It's about time someone stopped these people from completely ruining our country. Also, please try to stop the corruption and backhanders, says Maura, that are going on in politics. But I think we all recognise that sense of like real anger with the system serving the needs of some and forgetting about others and leaving people behind. And I think Maura is really, Piers, kind of capturing that in her commentary there.
Yeah, absolutely, Maura, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here and what we're going to be trying to do this week. It's to stop these people from ruining our country in terms of pushing up prices for future generations. And, you know, I see from Maura and a lot of the others, Mary Lou, who've come in, Charlotte and Michelle, and you can sense the frustration because they're obviously living their experience right here, right now. But I would say to people that people should have hope that change is happening and change is coming. And I think, you know, if it wasn't for, like, if you listen to what Maura is saying, if it wasn't for ourselves, it wasn't for our own, no, this was a developer-led scheme. This is a Fianna Fáil developer-led scheme, and we're the ones who told the people that because they came and lobbied us and we told them to hedge the wagon somewhere else. And unfortunately, you know, Darragh O'Brien and Fianna Fáil allowed them to hedge their wagon to them. So, like, this is us as a larger strength in the Oireachtas now, calling this out, trying to stop what is wrong policies that will seriously impact on communities and on families, but also trying to promote the alternative. And like this, if this was a decade ago or a bit more, like, you know, because we had all those bad Fianna Fáil property developer-led policies in the past, and they went through the Dáil without much of noise. And the reason being is Sinn Féin were very small at the time, didn't have speaking time in a lot of the cases, and now we're a big force because the people are with us. The people are know that we're going to stand up to this type of developer-led policies, know that the type of alternatives that we have that Owen has discussed there about how we can push down house prices. And as he said, this isn't rocket science. In parts of Dublin, they have done this. They've done it with a cooling. They can build houses for €190,000 and in that range. So it's not like that this is pie in the sky stuff. It has been done. It can be done. Political will and the resources is what's required. And recognising that you don't leave this to developers to design the policy, that you actually have to design a policy that has got home buyers and renters at the centre of it. And the other thing that we just need to want to make a point, because a number of the commentators or the comments that came in, Mary Lou talked about the rents and the exorbitant rents that people are paying and they can't save for a mortgage and so on. And it's really important to make this point again. Sinn Féin's policy is about freezing rents, but also about reducing rent. And we can do that. We can do that with the right political support. It's a commitment that we had that we would deliver on something like that if we got into government, and we will deliver it if we get into government. But even from the opposition benches, we will continue to pursue that. So what does it mean? It means putting 1 month back in your pocket, not in the landlord's pocket, by introducing a tax rebate that allows you to make that type of savings, because what has happened in rents in this state is just is absolutely ridiculous, and you can feel it, you can hear it from the comments there in terms of the pressure that individuals and families are in. So my message there to Maura and others is, don't lose hope. that change is happening. We can see it in terms of polls and all the rest. And I know you don't like talking about polls, Mary Lou, but you can see that people want change. People want a break from the past where we have developers designing the government's housing strategy. They like what Owen Bryn is saying. They like that, people like Dave McWilliams are coming out and backing what Owen is saying, that the ESRI, the central bank, they know that this makes sense. They know that this makes sense for them, for their families, for their families' families. And that's why people shouldn't lose hope.
Thanks a million, Piers, and thank you also, Owen. And we're running kind of close to the end of this meeting. Thank you all for being with us. But I'm going to leave the last word to Noreen. Noreen, thank you for being in touch with us. And Noreen tells her story. Noreen says she's 4 young adult children living at home. They've no possibility of moving out on their own ever, as she sees it. All of them are working. But rents and house prices are totally out of reach for them. And she worries about the possibility of her 4 adult children of establishing their lives and even starting families of their own. And Noreen, in that contribution, you are reflecting the experience of countless families, parents like yourselves, but adults themselves living at home with no real hope or sense that they can reach that goal of having their own home, of buying their own home, of renting in a secure and a sustainable way in the course of their lives. So what we want to say is this: we recognise absolutely that the issue of housing, despite the pandemic, despite the crisis that we are going through, that this issue of housing is still front and centre, arguably the single biggest social crisis that we face as a people. And it is a particular crisis for a particular generation. And we want to say to you also that it doesn't have to be this way. We said to you in the course of the election that housing can be solved, and it can. We said to you that Sinn Féin has the plan to make that happen, and we do. I also told you that we have the person who should be the Minister for Housing, and we do, and his name is Owen O'Brien. And I want to say, really, at these times, please understand that the pandemic and the coronavirus shone a very light bright on all of those cracks and all of those fault lines across our society, in our health system, but also too in our housing provision. Because now your home is your place of sanctuary, where you can isolate, where you can cocoon if you need to, where you can keep yourself and your family safe. So to all the naysayers, the people that don't have the vision to see beyond the end of their own nose, who said to us over many years when we argued for the right to housing that we were wrong, we say back to you, no, you were wrong and we were right. And all of you who have stood with us and who will stand with us to demand the right to housing, the right to a home for our people, all of us are on the right side of this story and on the right side of history. And we will turn this around. Be very sure of that. The government will not have it their own way. And on Wednesday, Owen will bring forward our motion and we will confront the government and say to them, you are making the same mistakes again and our people will pay the price. And that is not acceptable. So we want all of you to be part of this shout out on Wednesday, this pushback against this developer scheme. And we want you to stay with us and go the distance and not to lose hope, because change is not only possible, change is in the air, change is on the way. And we and you, all of us together, are the ones who can make it happen. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. Stay safe and keep in touch. Slán live.